So as part of GreenScreen, when we were developing the criteria, we saw that, leveraging the presence of chemicals on authoritative lists and all the rigorous study that goes into doing that really can make a GreenScreen assessment more efficient. So we built in all these different list-based information sources into the GreenScreen criteria. And what we started to hear from users is, wow, well, that would be a really useful standalone first step as a screening step. And so what we did was we ended up pulling out GreenScreen List Translator as a standalone tool, as well as incorporating it as a step of the more comprehensive assessment. So we did that back in 2012. And so what List Translator does, it's really a screening tool that's designed to quickly identify chemicals of high concern. It's built on the same criteria as GreenScreen, so you've got all the same hazard criteria, all the same hazard endpoints, and you use the benchmark 1 criteria, which we call the List Translator scoring algorithm. But so you just use that chemical of high concern criteria. And because the main difference between GreenScreen and List Translator, in addition to only looking at benchmark 1, is that rather than looking at all available data, you're only looking at list-based information sources, or which is presence or absence of a chemical on a list and how that authoritative body evaluated it. And the great thing about that is because it's looking for presence or absence, this can be and has been automated, so it makes it a really scalable approach. And there's a lot of confusion about lists out there. There's different types of lists. There's hazard lists put out by authoritative bodies. There are restricted substance lists put out by sectors and companies. And what's unique about List Translator is that it has this, it's built on that GreenScreen for Safer Chemicals foundation, the hazard endpoints, the hazard criteria. It's a very systematic look at and has that consistent criteria for evaluating chemicals and placing them on a list. So the LT1 chemicals actually captures a really wide array that typically encompasses a lot of these other lists. In terms of how GreenScreen List Translator screening is done, it's the exact same steps that we talked about for GreenScreen for Safer Chemicals. You identify the chemical, collect data, classify hazards, and assign the score. When you collect data, you just use list-based data, and when you assign the score, you just use benchmark 1. But everything else in the classify hazards is exactly the same. And in this case, our software partners have automated this whole process, so it can happen in seconds, which is amazing. And so this is just a visual representation of what GreenScreen List Translator does. It takes this information from the list, passes it through these hazard endpoints and hazard criteria, and then through the benchmark 1 criteria to assign a score. But really, it only answers the question, is this chemical a chemical of high concern? And it can be yes, possibly, or you don't know. This tool cannot identify safer alternatives. It can only identify known chemicals of concern. If you want to identify safer alternatives, this is a great first step for screening, and then you need to go to something more comprehensive. So where do you find all the information? In that document that I mentioned that's on our website, the GreenScreen Guidance and Resources, there are 5 sections and 13 annexes, I think. This is section 5, annex 11, called the GreenScreen Specified List, and it gives you the abbreviation of the list, which you'll see in all of the automated tools. It gives you a little bit more description, what hazard endpoints, and it gives you the links to those lists, so you can go look at them. The other thing that the methodology does is it bins lists into 2 categories. There are authoritative lists and there are screening lists. And this was done again with our technical advisory committee and peer review. An authoritative list is a list that's based on comprehensive expert review by a recognized authoritative body, whereas a screening list doesn't meet one or both of those criterion. Lists are developed for a lot of different reasons by a lot of different organizations, so it's important to understand what it is in order to know how to use that information, and that's all been built into the list translator. And ultimately, what we have, this is Annex 12 of the GreenScreen for Safer Chemicals Guidance document, is a GreenScreen list translator map. And what this does is it gives you all of those 43 lists, and each of those lists has certain categories. This is, for example, category 3B. So each of those categories is then translated into a GreenScreen hazard endpoint. As well, and then that gets translated in compared to the GreenScreen hazard criteria to give you a hazard level or range, and then that gets rolled in compared to the benchmark 1 criteria to give you a list translator score. And there's 2 organizations that have automated the GreenScreen list translator that are licensed to do so, Tox Not PBC and the Healthy Building Network.